My name is Kate Vines, and I'm the founder and head of Patient Care for Rare Cancers Australia. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Ngunnawal people, and their elders past and present. I'd also like to welcome the Honourable Ken Wyatt, Assistant Minister for Health, he'll be here any second, and the other honourable members and senators here today. It's great to see so many of our friends from other patient organisations, representatives for the pharmaceutical industry who have so generously supported this report. And of course, we're delighted to welcome so many of our patients and carers here today. But I'll come back to you all in a moment. When we established RCA 4 years ago, we knew that there was a serious problem with the treatment of Australians with rare and less common cancers. But to be frank, we didn't appreciate how large the problem was. Our first report in 2014 really highlighted the issues. RLC cancers account for half of all cancer deaths. There's minimal funding through the PBS, minimal research funding, and no overall improvement in survival since 1990. It's extraordinary to think about that last statistic. No overall improvement in survival since 1990. With all the scientific, technological and other developments we've made, no progress for this group of diseases. My role at RCA is to focus on patients and their needs. As a consequence, I'm speaking to Australians with rare or less common cancer every day. They come from all ages and all walks of life, and some of them are here today. Let me introduce them to you. We have Angus and his mum Tricia, who'll be speaking with us soon. Matthew Webster and his parents David and Jennifer. David McDonald. Eric Twerd and his daughter Genevieve. Cheryl Kepler and her daughter Michelle, who sadly lost their husband and father Vincent recently. And Paul, Deborah and Millie Warrington Love, who lost their young son and brother James last year. I encourage you to chat to these families after the formalities, because to meet these folks is to truly understand the challenges that are detailed in this new report. The impact of these cancers is community-wide, from children to Gen Y, Gen X and baby boomers, both male and female. Rare and less common cancers know no boundaries. To give you a brief and personal perspective on the impact of one of these cancers, we've invited Tricia Cashmere, Angus's mum, to speak to you today. Tricia, Angus and the rest of their family have journeyed through the health system over the past 2 years, and her reflections are powerful and very relevant to today. Please welcome Tricia.
Good morning, Honourable Senators, members, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to tell you a story. I'm a 43-year-old mother of 4 boys, Henry, Angus, Noah and Darcy. A lot of people, including me, struggle to remember which one's which, so it's helpful that their first names make the word hand. Henry, Angus, Noah, Darcy. Solves lots of problems. My husband Steve and I both worked outside our home, and as you can imagine, our house is pretty action-packed. In 2013, our lives took an unexpected turn. Angus, our second son, the A in our hand, showed me some lumps in his neck. He was just 9 at the time. We were worried, went straight to our GP. We were very reassured by normal blood tests and the fact that Angus was really well, very active, full of energy, playing football. Our GP thought it was likely that it had just been some viral exposure and the lumps should go down. She said, come back if they don't. But those lumps, they were persistent little buggers, and so back we went. More blood tests, still normal, an ultrasound inconclusive. So Angus was referred to the kids' hospital at Randwick to have one of the nodes removed. Probably nothing, they said, just to be cautious. I can replay the day of the follow-up appointment in my head like a movie. The surgeon smiled at us as she came into the clinic, and Steve and I looked at each other and breathed a sigh of relief. There couldn't be a problem if she was smiling. But there was. Angus had classical Hodgkin lymphoma, nodular sclerosing type. And she said, I've asked one of the paediatric oncologists to see you. Almost like a game show, a door slid open and in walked Toby Trahere, a man who's here and a man that we would come to know very well. Toby said some really important things to us that day. He told us that Angus's Hodgkin's lymphoma was treatable and that a cure was achievable. And as we were driving home trying to work out what to do next, Steve and I both reflected on being parents who were given a different message. Imagine incurable, not treatable. It was unthinkable. The next 10 weeks went by in a blur. Initially, I went back to work. At that time, I was a part-time lawyer in a commercial firm, and so did Steve, who was a self-employed physiotherapist. I naively believed that we'd be able to continue as usual. In those days, I didn't even know what a round of chemotherapy was. For Angus's first oncology appointment, I phoned in from work. Steve was with him at the hospital. And Toby outlined the treatment, and I managed to lose every bit of work I did that day. I went and asked my boss for 6 months' leave without pay, and I never got back. Treatment consisted for Angus of a cocktail of chemotherapy. He was incredibly unwell and had unplanned admissions for complications like pain and infections. Either my husband or I were with him at all times. Imagine sleeping in a room with 4 kids and their parents. Every child has at least 2 IV pumps, added alarms probably every 2 hours. But our community was amazing. Our meals were cooked, the other boys were cared for, and my house was cleaner than it's ever been. There were challenges though. Henry, the H in our hand, a beautiful, kind, gentle boy, was in year 7 at the time and really struggled with school. And around that time he developed some chronic pain issues. Noah, our N, as a quiet, artistic boy, stopped sleeping well. But great news in October 2013, no signs of active cancer. Though there was relief, there was not the euphoria that I expected. We were all raw and exhausted, and we were hoping that we were done. The odds that cancer would not return were over 90%. Fantastic. 2014, we got on with our life. We took the boys on a trip for a month in the Northern Territory in a motorhome. Yes, 6 of us in a motorhome. It was great. Fast forward to 2015, and Angus has lumps in his neck again. I think they're from a cold that he's carried through January, but unusually Steve and I both went for that February checkup. You know you're in trouble when the fellow walks out of the room and walks back in with 4 doctors. The cancer was back, this time in his neck and abdomen. This time the treatment plan was much more aggressive. Toby was keen to get Angus onto a recently published protocol, and it included a newer drug called brentuximab vedotin. The drug was showing great results for Hodgkin's disease with much less side effects. We didn't realise at the time that brentuximab was not a PBS-funded drug for Angus's diagnosis, though the drug company provided it to us at a reduced cost through their patient access scheme. Angus had 2 cycles, and he was responding well. He was able to continue at school. He was the school captain, which meant that we could continue at work and be with our other children. But the protocol only used 2 rounds, so we moved on to the next chemotherapy cocktail. He was meant to have 2 rounds of that one too, but round 1 saw him in hospital for weeks with severe nausea, vomiting and diarrhoea. A PET scan after that first round demonstrated that all that chemo was doing was making Angus sick. His lymphoma was progressing. So we were referred to radiotherapy. He had a month of daily treatment, pinned down to a bed with a thermoplastic mask. While the facilities were modern and the staff were incredibly kind, it kind of felt like I was letting someone do medieval torture on my child. After the radiotherapy, there were still some small patches of active cancer, and he was put on a list for an autologous stem cell transplant. He went into isolation in the kids' hospital in Randwick last year on the 2nd of September and finally left hospital on the 3rd of October. Through 2015, we became aware of a study that used brentuximab as a post-treatment consolidation therapy. The results showed a halving of the recurrence of disease. We were really keen to get this therapy for our son, but we hit some roadblocks. Unlike the previous occasion, the pharmaceutical company was refusing access to their patient access scheme. The drug was going to cost us $11,000 plus per dose for 16 doses. There was a conversation around this time where it was suggested that we could just watch and wait. If it was 12 months earlier, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And I expect that this is something that rare cancer patients hear often. But we weren't prepared to let it go. It wasn't 12 months ago or 20 years ago, it was now, and we wanted the very best that we could for our 12-year-old son. It wasn't until we were introduced to rare cancers that things really started to happen. And who would have thought that we'd be crowdfunding to raise money for cancer treatment? Over $260,000 was raised for our family and from our family and friends, from my old colleagues, thousands of generous people who've never met my family. Angus has now had 6 doses of brentuximab. His central line has been removed and he's in high school and he looks fantastic. It's not easy for him. Angus suffers from severe anxiety that's triggered by anything from being too hot to being too cold or having a sore throat. But we're getting help, and Angus and all of us are determined that cancer's not going to define our lives. And as for the rest of us, what's been the effect on our family? Emotionally, I think we've all been affected. The boys, my hand, have all been affected in different ways. Henry, our oldest son, is in year 10 now and still has issues with chronic pain and anxiety. High school has been a struggle, and there's been periods where he's been incredibly distressed. Noah, he has a lot of trouble sleeping and needs constant reassurance, but Darcy, the little one, he's our adaptable number 4. He keeps us all laughing. There are, of course, financial consequences. We've both lost a lot of income, and I no longer do my pre-cancer job. But it's important to note that apart from the medication, children are treated at no cost to patients at the Children's Hospital Network, which is an incredible thing and I think speaks volumes for the people who work in paediatric oncology. But the current TGA and PBAC system is not working for people like us. For me, the biggest challenge was that I didn't know that I needed this drug for my son until I needed it. Cancer can be brutal and fast. In November last year, I wasn't aware that the approval system even existed. It's really important to realise that the story of my family is not unique. Around 950 children are diagnosed with cancer each year in Australia, and of those, 150 are diagnosed with cancer types that have less than 30% survival rate or suffer relapse and then have much reduced chances of cure. Every parent wants the best for their child, and that usually means the best education or the best sporting or music opportunities. But for some of us, it just means that we want the best treatment. I really appreciate your time.